Welcome to As the Key Turns. I'm David Lehman, and I spent 23 years in the federal penitentiary located at Marion, Illinois. It was the only Supermax federal prison at the time. It was called a Level 6. Today I wanted to talk about what's going on in New York State, specifically the corrections. Just yesterday, I believe it was, looks like the corrections staff set one of their buses on fire. Now, of course, no one knows exactly who did it, but it appears to be that the correctional staff set one of the several $100,000 buses on fire. Why would they do that? Well, they're on strike. Why are they on strike? That's a good question. Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York State, just told them recently, you stop this strike and you go back to work and do your job. Well, I'd like to say to Kathy Hochul, why don't you do your job? If you were doing your job, there wouldn't be a strike. I mean, one of the correctional officers was complaining that he did 3,000 hours of overtime in 2024. That means that he did his normal 2,000 hours of work, and then he did 3,000 more. So could you imagine having 2.5 full-time jobs? Because that's what this guy has, 2.5 jobs. He's overworked. They only have 70% of the staffing, but now they said, well, we're going to adjust that and make it 100% staffing. So really the old 70% is now 100%. And then they want to cut that out. But they're working people 2.5 times what they should. Now, because of this staff unauthorized strike, they're keeping their staff 24 hours a day now. They're asking the state police which one of them have correctional officer experience so that they can put them in. She's called up the National Guard, like 3,500 National Guardsmen are now going to do what? Work in a prison that they don't know anything about? So we're going to take Joe, the average guy, who just happens to be in the National Guard, and we're going to put him in Attica? Has anybody ever heard of the Attica riots in the 70s? You know, I had inmates that were there, and they got paid off in the 80s and early 90s when I was there from the same stupidity. The reason that the correctional officers are walking out is they don't feel safe. They don't feel safe for themselves, the inmates, anybody, because they're understaffed. New York State specifically had all this Black Lives Matter crap going on where they said, oh, well, down with the police, defund the cops and all that. Well, that filtered down into corrections too, because, believe it or not, corrections is considered law enforcement. Now, I know there's a bunch of state troopers out there now clutching their pearls saying, oh my God, of course they're not law enforcement. Okay, whatever. The federal ones are. That's why I get to carry a gun wherever I go in the United States when I'm there. So, got an article here written by Brendan J. Lyons of the Times-Union in New York. And let's just go over a few things that he said. More than 30 New York prisons where thousands of correctional officers work has been on strike now for this last 6 days. The unsanctioned strikes just started on Monday. And Kathy Hochul then decided to, like I said before, activate the National Guard. And then they're sent out a request to compile a list of all troopers with prior New York State Department of Corrections experience. So now they're going to take the New York State troopers and backfill and try to use the troopers to be correctional officers. Yeah, bet they like that. The labor standoff is ongoing as conditions inside the prisons increasingly deteriorating. It says prisoners in one facility haven't showered in a week, and they're eating nothing but cold meals because they don't have staff available to make hot meals anymore, and they're all locked down. It says that these people are being, the correctional staff is being made to stay for 24 hours. Now that's something too, is the correctional staff. You see, the rest of the people, the administrative people and all the other ancillary jobs, they're not. So what you're missing is the correctional staff. So all them people that are doing them worthless jobs where they're pretending to train the inmates that when they get out they can have a good job, they're just doing their regular things. So, you know, the hell are you people doing? Prisons are like small towns, okay? If you take all the cops away from your small town, what do you think is going to happen after a while? They're running amok. It's not good for the staff, and it certainly isn't good for the inmates to be in that kind of situation. Just insanity that these people are doing. Here, I'll read it. Memorandum issued to prison superintendents by Correctional Commissioner Daniel F., and I can't even pronounce his name, Martuscello III, indicating that staff shortages have been prompted the agencies to redefine its work, and 70% of original staff is now 100%. So there we go. Well, their 100% is really only 70%. And they're being forced to work mandatory shifts of 16 hours or more in unsafe conditions. Kathy Hochul and her administration decided that you can't put a guy into solitary confinement for more than 15 days because it's just cruel and terrible and unusual and awful and it's just bad. So if the inmate murders anybody, the most that they can get is 15 days. So I murder a couple of staff members and I get 15 days. Big deal. I murder another inmate. I get 15 days. Big deal. It's not a deterrent. Before you could give them 6 months of things like that, you know, but now at least in the state of New York, they're not allowing inmates' actions to have consequences. That's why you, dear viewer, are not in prison, because you don't want to do a thing and then have to suffer the consequences of which might be prison. So that guy that pisses you off at work, you don't bash in his head with a wrench because you'd go to prison for it. Well, the inmates don't have that incentive. They're already in prison. So if they smash somebody's head in with a wrench, they get 15 days and then they're let out. So it'd be like you murdering your neighbor and getting 2 weeks in the county jail and then kicked back out. I mean, oh, wow, is that much of an incentive? The union and the staff tried to work out some of this stuff, you know, where they said, look, we're being way overworked. A guy working 3,000 hours, that means he's doing 2.5 hours for what a normal person would do 1 hour, you know, and that's just in overtime. My goodness, to ask people to work that much, especially in that kind of a dangerous environment where you're worried all the time. At least I was on alert all the time. So it's really hard on the nerves. Now, 2 days after the memo was issued about the staff, a correctional facility in Erie County was locked down after officers retreated from the inmate dorms because their supervisor, the sergeant, said that it was unsafe conditions. Well, now that sergeant is under investigation and they're going to try to prove that he did something criminally wrong and put him in jail. So what happens in New York State is when you feel unsafe and you back out of a situation because, hey, I might get killed, they're going to try to prosecute you. So imagine a state trooper that pulls over the car, and when everybody gets out guns and bombs and knives and it looks like maybe he's going to die, if he retreats from that situation and calls for backup, they're going to prosecute him. How dare you walk away from somebody that's dangerous? Same thing in corrections, you know, I mean, you're not allowed to retreat when it looks like you're going to get killed or injured. We'll continue to work with the New York State Police to determine the cause of the incident and if any criminal charges are appropriate. That's a quote. When the correctional officers retreated, they decided, hey, we need to go on strike. We've had enough. And when they went on strike, the facility right next to them went on strike, and now 30 different facilities are on strike. The same thing happens with the inmates. When you have a riot in one prison, it spreads that feeling throughout the entire system, and you can have many facilities have riots. That's why when Atlanta blew up, Marion locked down just for that reason. Same thing works with the staff. We all talk to each other. The prisoners all talk to each other, and we know what's going on. So if your prison is so dangerous that you've gone on strike, I'm going to go on strike with you. Now, of course, it's illegal to go on strike. And so Kathy Hochul sought a court order and was granted a temporary restraining order, and everybody was ordered back to work. Well, you know, why the hell would I go back to work if I'm going to die? Okay, I mean, I'm going to get in trouble if I don't go back to work. Well, if I go back to work, I'm going to be dead. So why the hell would I do that? Plus, society now is being trained, especially with this Black Lives Matter stuff that has been recently gone on, where we can have riots in major cities and very few, if anyone, is arrested for it. People died in those riots and nothing really happened for it. So these correctional officers correctly saw that nothing happens to anybody else. It ain't going to happen to us. If we all go on strike, what are they going to do? Fire everybody? They are already running at 70%, not 100%. They're having thousands of hours of overtime per individual, and now you're going to fire them all? Yeah, right. Okay, that's like this marijuana crap. The feds say it's a criminal offense, a felony criminal offense. You can get many years in a federal penitentiary for selling marijuana. Yet each state now, Illinois is one, this is the one that Marion was in, they sell it in state sanctioned and licensed facilities, yet it's against federal law. So the states get to ignore the federal law. The Trump administration is now suing the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago over not following federal law. So those correctional officers said, really? It's against a state law? Well, we just won't follow it because who cares about the law anymore? You've trained us really well. This liberal stuff that, you know, don't worry about it. Everything is okay. Do whatever you want to do. This is the results of that attitude. Is okay. Now wait till the cops in your town walk out. Wait till they say, you know what, we're not getting paid enough to do this job. This place sucks. We're out of here. You guys handle it. Well, that's what's happening in the prison systems, especially in the state of New York. Federal systems are also strained because they've taken away from the correctional staff and they put these people in these ancillary jobs that don't make any difference. These individuals that are coordinators for all kinds of different things. Emergency coordinator. Well, if they have an emergency, they can't talk to the warden. They have to talk to the emergency coordinator. And then he liaisons between the prison staff and the police and the special teams that are going to show up. Right. Like a warden couldn't do that because he's too good or she's too good. You're going to be surprised to hear that the injunction that they put out has been worthless. It didn't do any good. Everyone's ignoring it. They're just still on strike. Why not? You're going to die anyway, right? Now let's read this little part of this thing here. That day, the union gave the administration its demands, which included no penalties for officers who walked off the job, the suspension of the state law that places restrictions on the use of long-term solitary confinement of inmates, a 2-pay grade increase for correctional officers and sergeants to boost recruitment efforts, and the retention of a mediator to discuss all outstanding financial, staffing, and working condition issues. That's what they're asking for. Now, she has appointed a mediator, and they're going to mediate now and try to come to some conclusion to resolve the issues that they're having. Of course, they got to pay a hell of a lot more. Nobody wants to be a correctional officer anymore. In these circumstances, I certainly would not have been a correctional officer. Matter of fact, I would have, if I was eligible to retire, I would have taken Trump up on his offer and retired from the Bureau of Prisons just to get the hell out of there. I retired at age 51. I see no reason why these correctional officers are even risking their lives every day in the state of New York. After seeing that one guy worked mandatory. He didn't volunteer for this. He mandatory worked 3,500 hours. Now, imagine that you work your regular shift and then you work another shift. But you do this 6 days a week because that's what you do. 6 days a week. Maybe you get a day off, or maybe you work at 7 days a week because on your Sunday you need to go 8 hours because you're going to work 3,500 hours of overtime and 2,000 hours of your regular stuff. Unbelievable. If I was a guy out on the street, you think I would want to show up at the Attica State Prison, basically be locked into the place, not have a life on my own on the outside because that's all I do is work there? And so in the words of Kathy Hochul, do your job, Kathy. Fix this.